All right, we are live, but we got to let it breathe just for a moment here, gang. Hang tight. Hit me, baby, one more time. I was suddenly reminded of that lyric due to a pre stream conversation we were having just barely. I'm not a Britney Spears fan for what it's worth. And we are almost good. Come on, Facebook. Welcome in, everybody. It is the Mile High Huddle podcast. I'm your host, Chad Jensen. With me, my fellow football priest. You know him, you love him. The deputy / no, what? I keep forgetting this, dude. Senior editor at milehighhuddle.com, Zack Kelberman. Zack, dude, not a whole lot of breaking news to get into tonight. There are some interesting developments we're going to touch on, but the Broncos signed a cornerback, a DB, really, Tanner McAllister, to a future contract. Spent some time with the Browns. What are your thoughts?
Very early on in the process, the Broncos are going to continue adding to their offseason roster. Just someone to bring in for spring practices and workouts and hope that you found a diamond in the rough. If you want to read into it, you could look at the Broncos are prioritizing secondary. They do need another cornerback permanently opposite Patrick Surtain. So it's a worthy pickup on January 22nd, Chad.
Here's the from the Broncos press release. McAllister entered the NFL in 23 as an undrafted free agent out of Oklahoma State and spent a year at Ohio State as a Oklahoma State Cowboy, had a lot of playing time, et cetera, et cetera. Joined the Browns, spent the regular season on their practice squad this past season, and he was elevated, Zach, for 3 games, so there's something there, recording 2 tackles, etc. So the Broncos now have 13 players signed to futures contracts since the new calendar 2024 year rolled over. So, yeah, some depth. I mean, today, at least 3 mocks, I should say, over the last couple days that I read today, have the Broncos taken a cornerback at pick 12. So the need is there, but obviously, pending the quarterback situation, I can't see it outpacing the quarterback.
Yeah, if you're going to take a flyer on a defensive player, might as well take it from a former Brown with their defense and what Jim Schwartz did over there. Pretty impressive. And I agree with what you said on Twitter earlier today, Chad, in reaction to the mock drafts. Like, I could get on board with it, but it'd be a tough sell to pass on a quarterback to pursue a cornerback this April.
We also have some hellos in order. We see David Youngkin, the first one in. First comment today in the stream. Awesome. We're going to get to the trade stuff, David. Trust on that. Shout out to Jeff W. What's going on? The early birds. Woofy. Good to see Woofy. An OG right there. Woofy been with us a long time. Smouse in the house. We got Zachary Smouse. What's going on, big dog? Unique prepping. And, of course, the Duchess. She's here. She's here to the pit of misery. Dilly dilly. Love it. Lots to get to, but real quick, Zach, before we get into the main crux of our conversation tonight, the Broncos, of course, as we know, not too long ago, parted ways, called it a career anyway for KJ Hamler, former second-round pick. He's gone on recently, though, given another opportunity in Buffalo. What do you see as his career outlook now, Zach?
It's tough, man. Like I wrote earlier today, he did latch on with Buffalo. I found it interesting that he'd signed a futures deal before Buffalo was even eliminated from the playoffs. I haven't really seen that before, but a once promising prospect. He had elite deep speed. I thought he could be something, even though you and I rued that pick when it was made in the second round in 2020, Chad. But hamstring injury after hamstring, and then the torn ACL, dislocated hip. How do you come back from that? I just feel anything he can carve out in Buffalo or otherwise would be a ceiling for him. I don't see much.
All right. I agree, unfortunately. Now, who knows? He's got the talent, but we shall see. Real quick, guys, some matters of business. We're sitting here on the 22nd day of January, so we got to update where things stand on the Super Chat rankings to sharing a brain, Scott, Mr. Producer. On the Super Chat contest. So as you guys know, we take the top 10 finishers on Super Chat on YouTube in a given month. Their names go in a hat, so to speak. We do a live drawing, and the winner, raffle, gets a Broncos jersey of their choosing, and it's a small way that we can give back to our great community. And as it stands, we have a first-time ever name, Zach. In first place, it's Rattlesnake Master. But Michaela's hot on the heels. I have very little doubt that she'll probably leapfrog Rattlesnake Master, but she's at number 2 in climbing. Troy is at 3, the Lady D at 4, James Moss 5, Gary Leeds Palmer, the swashbuckler himself at 6, Mike Edel 7, Sam Bam 8, Zeus McPeak at 9, pardon me, and Naj Altaf at 10, with just a few of the other names here that you can see just outside the top 10. Montana, David Kilgore, David Cromwell, etc. So much love and respect. Appreciate each and every one of you. But Zach, I want to get to the main crux of tonight's conversation. First thing is, and this what kind of triggered me on this. Actually, hold on. We don't keep Michaela waiting. Let's grab Michaela first. Love you, Michaela. Thank you so much. Pivotal in helping us keep the lights on, especially this time of year. Great members of our community like you, bona fide Mount Rushmore Super Chat superstars. It really does help. She says, a very interesting article, Chad. Won't happen, but I would rather draft a quarterback at 12. Great read. Are we talking about the Tua article? I'm not sure exactly what article. That's the one I wrote today. All right. Let's talk about it real quick since she's bringing it up, Zach. It's kind of fun, but it's very unrealistic. It's not anywhere within the realm of possibility. Perhaps it's in a football, alternate football universe, but let me find this kid. I can't remember the dude's name. Stand by 1 second. Pro Football Network's Ian Cummings, Zach. He's dropped a 7-round mock draft, but he started things off with what would be a blockbuster trade that involved 3 teams. Broncos, though, are one of them. They get Tua Tagovailoa plus the number pick 137 this year. The Miami Dolphins, who are also involved in this with the Chicago Bears, get Justin Fields, some other compensation, including the Broncos 2025 second-round pick. The Bears get a bunch of draft picks. So that's what she's talking about is it's slow. It's a slow Monday. Very little news to get into today, but it was a fun read. I tried not to dunk on him. I didn't want it to, we're all in the same boat, Zach, when it comes to off-season content where, we sometimes have to get a little bit creative in the topics we choose. But as unrealistic as the trade may be, do you see any way, shape, or form Tua, who's entering a contract year in Miami, would be on his way out from being a Dolphin?
I won't dunk on it either. I'll agree that it's a fun idea to ponder, Chad. I'm sure it was a great read as well, but there's no way it's going to happen. This is not Madden where you have these blockbuster. You said Fields was involved, so it'd be a 3-team trade or a multiple-team trade. It doesn't happen in today's NFL, and I don't know that Sean Payton would want Tua. As impressive as Tua looked in Mike McDaniel's system, Mike McDaniel is not Sean Payton, and vice versa. I truly believe whether it's Caleb Williams, Drake May, we don't know the answer. I do believe that Sean Payton wants to handpick his own guy, at least that's my hope, and develop him from the ground up.
Yeah, so I agree. In this same mock, for what it's worth, right, the Broncos end up with a Pro Bowl franchise quarterback. They get to keep somehow their 2024 first-round pick and at 12 overall. They take the trendy pick for the Broncos amongst the mocksters right now. That is the cornerback out of Alabama. I just brain farted his name. What's his name? Arnold. So, hey, if you were to manage to get a franchise quarterback and a possible blue chip all-pro corner, and you're not having to give up your first-round pick, hey, that's a football world I want to live in someday, Zach.
Yeah, but here's my question, though. It might be a hot take, but is Tua a no-doubt slam dunk franchise quarterback? I think he's been a pretty good regular season quarterback, if not a system quarterback in Miami, but there's a lot of concern about him, chiefly playing in cold weather, number one. He kind of wilted down later in the season, and in Denver, the weather gets pretty cold. So I like Tua, but I wouldn't bank the next 10 years of the Broncos franchise on Tua.
Yeah, Terry and Arnold also mocked by Dane Brugler, Daniel Jeremiah. So it's a name to keep an eye on, depending on how the quarterback dominoes fall. Lots more to get to, including a super chat here in a moment from Zeus McPeak. But first, guys, we got to remind you, we're coming up on, of course, conference championship weekend. It's unfortunate that once again the Broncos are out of it, but while you're enjoying at least the entertainment aspect of watching these teams compete to go to the Super Bowl, make Little Caesars, which is the official pizza sponsor of the NFL, part of your game day. You order online during our Pizza pregame. That's 1 hour before and 3 hours after the NFL kickoffs, and get ready for some football and fun. You get to choose your favorite Little Caesars pizza or pick the toppings you crave. And either way, Zach, you win.
And speaking of winning Broncos country, everyone scores with convenient delivery or our in-store pizza portal pickup. So grab some friends and enjoy a few slices during the next playoff game.
This is really cool. To a night where we have literally the first two faces on the MHH Mount Rushmore back-to-back super chats getting us rolling. Love it. That's all is right with the world when we have Michaela and Zeus McPeak. What is going on, Zeus? He says, hi, all. We need a solid draft this year. Yes, we do. Yes, we do. I mean, Broncos, 24-ish million over the cap. They're going to have to probably, Zach, make some painful decisions beyond the Russell Wilson situation. Those draft picks are going to be even more crucial this time around. They're sitting on 6, and George Paton teased that they're on the hunt, on the lookout to acquire more.
We were going over the super chat rankings, and there was a green arrow next to Michaela and next to Stu, and I thought to myself, it's no surprise they're already rocking up the leaderboards for this month. Thank you so much, Stu, as always. And I think you made this comment a few podcasts ago, and I echoed it. This is the most important Broncos draft in the post-Peyton Manning era. If they hit on it, the rebuild in the post-Russ era won't be so bad. If they whiff, it could set them back a few. They have to get this right, especially with only one pick as it stands right now in the top 75.
Man, I was hoping we would. There was a chance anyway. I was hoping we might get some news on the Russell Wilson front today, since we're coming up on tomorrow. Will actually be the 2-week anniversary of the end of season pressers. They said they were going to take a couple weeks. Hopefully this week we get something, and that can at least set us down a more concrete path, Zach, of how to kind of project this offseason. The Ronk jumping in on Facebook. Love you, big dog. Michael Ronquillo, the mayor of our MHH community, as it were. Always great to see you, big dog.
Thank you, Ronk.
Okay, let me see here. A couple other hellos. What's up? The myth, the legend, Cooper in the house. Cooper, MHH for life. Good to see you, little man. Give our best to your mom, Michaela, and keep on being strong, man. You the man. All right, Zach, I've teased it enough. Let's get into this. Again, this was an article or a topic for tonight's stream that was kind of inspired by Bob Morris's article today at milehighhuddle.com, taking a look at the 4 most rumored names, we'll say, for the Broncos to potentially trade away in order to stockpile some, lower the cap and stockpile some draft picks. George Paton, as a former Vikings front office guy, loves stockpiling picks. But what I think made it an interesting conversation, Zach, beyond what we talk about on a night-to-night basis, I mean, the notions of trades and whatnot, is realistically, what can the Broncos get in exchange for some of these guys? And I think that's crucial, because it's not just a matter of, hey, if you can get a draft pick, great, but does it outpace what kind of impact they can make to the team? In other words, the value they get back, would they be better off with that, or would the value that player as a Bronco would still provide? And so here is, and Bob's pretty savvy in understanding values, salary cap stuff. That's how we originally crossed paths with Bob back in the day, and he became a staffer, was his expertise on this. But here's what let me read a couple things on Jerry Jeudy. Okay. He says, talking about an Adam Schefter radio appearance where he reported that one offer for Jerry Jeudy last year, Zach, involved a 3rd and 5th round pick. And then he went on to say, while Schefter didn't elaborate further, it's hard to see the Broncos getting a 3rd rounder in 2024, given that Judy's in the final year of his deal. A 2024 4th rounder is more likely, because Jeudy may get a deal that would net a 4th round compensatory pick. So let's start there for a moment. If you could shed the 13, is it 13.5, Scott, I think, on Judy's 5th year, something like that. If you could shed the 13.5 that you're tied to on Jeudy and come away with the 4th round pick, Zach, is that a deal you would take?
Yeah. I absolutely would in a heartbeat, because you're also shedding the bad attitude. You're also shedding the bad juju. You're also doing what you did when you got rid of Randy Gregory and Frank Clark. And for anyone who didn't believe in those intangible qualities, you saw it, how the defense coalesced after those two were gone. I have no doubt about that. Both sides need a fresh start. Jerry Jeudy can try to realize his potential elsewhere and pout and get upset elsewhere and be passive aggressive, and the Broncos can move on with hopefully Cortland Sutton. You have Marvin Mims, who had a pretty good rookie season, pretty decorated. You're probably going to add to that in the draft. I would 100% move on. The cap savings in this instance, Chad, is a bonus. The Broncos need capital, and it's two birds with one stone, getting rid of who I think is a malcontent at this stage of his career.
You know, we talked about this last night. I can't remember who it was that asked the question. Apologies. But, you know, the idea of why is it that our players, you know, they struggle here and then we cut them and they go on to have success elsewhere. We talked about that last night. Judy's the one player in particular on this list who's kind of underperformed. Wouldn't surprise me if he lands elsewhere and thrives well beyond what he's produced here in Denver, simply because, you know, if he lands on the right team with a pocket quarterback that's good at delivering the ball and pre-snap reads and anticipation and accuracy and touch, he could thrive and live up to his initial draft billing. But he just hasn't had the right quarterbacks here, Zach, to fully capitalize on how he wins and how he gets open. And I'm not pointing to that as a full-blown excuse for some of the antics, but wouldn't surprise me if he went elsewhere and thrived because of that. And then we'll grab the Duchess.
I don't know. I mean, Cortland Sutton suffered through the same bad quarterback play, but he had a career year with Russell Wilson. I think Jerry Jeudy, yeah, the scheme hurt him, and Russell Wilson's inefficiency down the field hurt him, but when you're throwing the ball, you still have to catch it regardless of what team you play for. The issues that Jerry Jeudy has, Chad, is beyond just Denver. It's in his own head, and it's also some physical limitations as well.
Whoops, wrong button. The Duchess, love you, number 2 tonight. Thank you so much, Michaela. She says, speaking of a draft, how much does it hurt the Broncos not having a second-round pick? I mean, it definitely hurts. And by the way, that pick was dealt to New Orleans to help acquire Sean Payton's coaching rights. They will have a second-round pick next year, unless, Zach, they deal it away for Tua Tagovailoa in a convoluted three-way trade. But for a team right now, Zach, that is extremely overextended on the cap and has multiple needs across the roster, it hurts not having a 2 this year, but how bad? What's your answer for the Duchess?
You're right. It definitely doesn't help. That's a high round pick they can probably get an instant starter with. But here, one of two things. Just because you have a second round pick doesn't mean you're guaranteed to land that star. Look at KJ Hamler, for example. And number two, if there's no one on the board at 12, if their quarterback of choice is off the board or some other player, they can move down 5-10 spots maybe and pick up a second round pick and kind of have the best of both worlds. So Michaela, just because they don't have one right now doesn't mean they won't come late April.
That's a thing, you know, that separates kind of the philosophies of these two, Sean Payton, George Payton. This was something that the Building the Broncos guys, Nick and Carl, talked about last week. And that is, if you look back, we already touched on this, but George Payton with the Vikings all those years, their philosophy with the GM at the time, of course, Spillman was, hey, let's stockpile as many picks as possible. We want to have as many darts to throw at the board as we can. You go back and look at the history, Zach, of Sean Payton in New Orleans with Mickey Loomis. And, you know, some drafts were more prolific than others, but it was kind of like 4 or 5 guys that they would trade up. They'd kind of have their short list of dudes that they were after in that draft. And if that meant having to trade up to get them, no problem, as long as they got the core guys they were after. So it's kind of interesting to see as the years go on, it looks like we are going to get a second year of the Payton draft experience, how those two philosophies kind of play out for the Broncos. Then we'll grab Tyler.
Yeah, I mean, I do think they'll be in lockstep. It's something they talked about in that end of season press conference, being on the same page and being aligned. And as much as Sean Payton might want to win now and his job security might be great, he realizes you need draft picks to build from within. So I could see them stockpiling for sure.
Tyler on Facebook, appreciate you being with us, my friend. Love the hashtag usage. Welcome. He says, evening, gents. My question is, what wouldn't you give up to get a franchise quarterback? Having one is better and more valuable than any other position on the field. Do you think there's a chance that Sean Payton will trade up? Yeah, I do. I do think there's a chance. It's just a matter of, the cost. I guess I'm getting this backwards. Are there teams that are going to be willing to move back so he can move up? And then what's the cost thereof? But you're onto something here. It's kind of like speaks to something I say often, which is there is no such thing as a free agent franchise quarterback because teams do whatever they can when they have when they actually land one, they do whatever it takes typically to keep that dude around. And so you do have to really, Zach, kind of um, aim, orient, budget as much, whatever number of resources that it takes for you to get that guy within reason. You can argue, Zach, that the Broncos went overboard in their budgeting of resources for, say, Russell Wilson because it just didn't work out. But that was a guy who seemed like a relatively safe bet, right? 10 years in the league, 9-time Pro Bowler, went to the playoffs 8 of his 10 seasons, won a world championship. It seemed like a pretty safe bet to invest those resources. But what we didn't perhaps fully anticipate or appreciate was just how much the instability of the Broncos as a franchise, especially on a coaching level, would affect how that trade panned out. So what are your thoughts on the idea of the value of whatever it takes to get a quarterback and Sean Payton trading up?
Well, here's the rub. Russell Wilson had 10 years as a franchise quarterback. When you made that trade, though, you weren't guaranteed 10 more years of a slam dunk, no doubt, elite in his prime franchise quarterback. And that's what you need to get in the draft. So my answer is there is nothing I wouldn't give up for a franchise quarterback. I would trade multiple first round picks. I would trade Patrick Surtain. I would take and do anything necessary to acquire that guy. Here's the caveat. It has to be the right guy. And there's no way of knowing that. If the Broncos were assured of getting that 15-year next Mahomes or Herbert or whoever, there's nothing I wouldn't do. But you just don't know. Sean Payton can have his gut feelings, go through the evaluation process. They can be nearly certain, but no one's totally sure. And that's what makes the draft, Chad, such a crapshoot.
And this time around, there is no Andrew Luck. There is no Peyton Manning, 2 prospects who were viewed as like no-brainer franchise guys out of the box. Patrick Mahomes, as great as he is, I mean, he was a first-round pick for a reason, but I don't think many people in NFL expected him to become the next great quarterback of all time, possibly. Like, that was a little bit of a shock, but the Chiefs did what they had to do to land him. As Scott brings up here, you give up 3 first-round picks and change to get a franchise quarterback, but what do you give up for the chance to draft a possible franchise quarterback? And there's the rub. If it were one of the 3 guys, one of the top 3, Zach, we've talked a lot about Caleb Williams, Drake May, Jaden Daniels. If it's one of those 3, I'm not going to complain much at all if the Broncos give up quite a lot to move up in the draft and get one of those 3. But it just depends on whether or not they have any takers on the phone to allow them to move up and get in position.
And it's a catch-22 because we both realize Caleb Williams, Drake May, they're not Andrew Luck type prospects. They're not generational. But I can speak for myself. I still want the Broncos to swing for the fences each and every chance they get in hopes of finding that franchise guy and not stopping swinging until they get that franchise guy. So I would prefer they be more aggressive than passive when it comes to that position.
Lots more to get to. And that was a great question, by the way, Tyler. Yeah. Thank you for that. But we got to bring your attention back to HelloFresh, with whom you get farm fresh, pre-portioned ingredients and seasonal recipes delivered right to your doorstep. My family has used HelloFresh literally for years. It's a lifesaver. The convenience, the time you save, the headache you save, and having to pre-plan your meals and all this and that. HelloFresh makes it easy, and it's high-quality ingredients that allow you also, one of the benefits, to skip those trips to the grocery store and just count on HelloFresh to help you with making home cooking easy, fun, and affordable, which is why HelloFresh is America's #1 meal kit.
That's right. This time of year, everyone's looking to revamp their eating habits. Look to HelloFresh's wholesome, health forward options like over 30 calorie smart and protein smart recipes each and every single week. They say breakfast is the most important meal of the day, and HelloFresh agrees. In fact, they're giving all subscribers free breakfast for life. That means you'll enjoy a totally free breakfast item with every single HelloFresh delivery. Now, that's worth waking up early for, if I do say so myself, Chad.
No doubt about it. Again, I cannot speak highly enough. We've tried as a family all of the home delivery, you know, pre-planned meal kit providers out there. HelloFresh rises to the top, cream of the crop, no doubt about it. So it's time for you to go with HelloFresh, America's #1 meal kit. Go to HelloFresh.com/huddle free and use our code huddle free, one word, for that free breakfast for life. You get one breakfast item per box while your subscription with HelloFresh lasts. That's free breakfast for life at HelloFresh.com/huddle free with our code huddle free. All right, back to the conversation at hand. We got Doug jumping in on Facebook. So good to see you, my friend. Hope you're doing well. Thank you for the stars, as always, big dog. Really, really appreciate you. We got also Phil checking in down in Tucson, one of our great hashtag state of being members of this community. Much love and respect to you, Phil. Thank you for all the support. He says, good evening, Chad, Zach, and Deacon Scott. So I've been reading rumors that Jimmy Garoppolo, is a likely prospect for the Broncos because he'd be cheap. Any thoughts? Hashtag Buckham Go Broncos, MHH for life. Miss me on it. I think you already have an equivalent, basically. I mean, Jimmy G's better than Jarrett Stidham, probably from a immediate impact standpoint, but we're going to argue over leavings again. We're going to argue and split hairs, Zach, over reclamation projects. It's if you move on from Russ, do it the old-fashioned way. But, Zach, here's the problem. It would not surprise me in the least if Sean Payton and George Payton go, it doesn't look like it's our year to kind of get that cue in the draft, so we're going to find that middle-of-the-road quarterback to keep us competitively relevant.
God, I hate being on the quarterback carousel. No offense to you, Phil. I appreciate the question, but I'm in agreement with Chad. Jimmy G, I want to quote Scott, actually. He says he doesn't grade different levels of elite. I might have butchered that quote. I don't really grade different levels of mid. So if you think Jarrett Stidham is mid, Jimmy G is on the same level. Mid, he's also injury prone. And when you say cheap, I don't think he'll be $5 million or less cheap. And that's $5 million is what Jarrett Stidham's base salary is in 2024. So again, I don't understand Broncos country's desire to take a step backward, to take one step forward and be in the same position you're in now. The focus should be the next long-term young franchise quarterback, which is neither Jimmy G or Jarrett Stidham for that matter.
So he's still a Raider. He's under contract for what it's worth. This is part of the landscape of this conversation here. Jimmy G under contract in 24, $11.25 million as his base salary, and it's guaranteed. So, in other words, he's still a Raider, so you'd have to acquire him via trade. They might just cut him. There's some dead money consequences that they'd have to navigate, but I just don't think 11 million relative, Zach, to what caliber of play you'd get from him should be considered cheap. If you could get a true, even a guy like used to be franchise guy, like, or even fringe franchise guy, who am I thinking of? Like, not to say this, I'm not advocating for this, Zach, but like a Ryan Tannehill guy, still too far in the rear view where he was playing good ball. Either way, 11.2, I just don't think, you can't afford it anyway, Zach. You can't afford it.
It's double what Jarrett Stidham costs now, and you aren't going to be rolling with Jimmy G or Jarrett Stidham beyond 2024, if not sooner. So just, again, use your resources and your priorities to get that next hotshot quarterback out of the draft.
Okay. Let's, I want to go back to this conversation here, this topic of what the Broncos can get from the possible trade pieces. We talked about Judy. Cortland Sutton is another name. Obviously, he concerned a lot of Broncos fans, and it's ironic with his Instagram post that kind of was interpreted as a goodbye of sorts. And it's kind of ironic how Broncos fans are suddenly concerned again about the possibility of losing Cortland Sutton when you reverse to this time last year and fans were like, man, we could live without Cortland, but Judy, hold on to Judy. And it's just crazy. I don't say that to throw shade on Broncos fans because I was basically of the same mindset myself. It just goes to show you how the parity of the NFL isn't just about teams going from, worst to first and vice versa, but how the rise and fall of individual player stocks, how wild that can be on a year-to-year basis. But here's what Bob writes about what perhaps the Broncos could expect in compensation on Sutton. Quote, I imagine the draft pick compensation for Sutton would be similar to Judy. Broncos could acquire a 2024 fourth-round pick. Might be able to get a 2025 pick, something I suspect would be easier to obtain given that Sutton has 2 years left on his deal. So, Zach, Cortland Sutton in exchange for a 2024 fourth-round pick, would that be more valuable to the Broncos than keeping him around?
Well, for 2025, I'm taking off the table because he's way more valuable than having a pick for a year from now. And that's the debate that we had is when the Sutton and Judy rumors first popped up months ago. Would the Broncos be better off with a draft pick, whoever that might be, or having the player remain on the team? In Judy's case, I think the Broncos would be better off shipping him elsewhere, both financially and personnel-wise. With Cortland Sutton, if you get rid of him, who do you really have? You're relying on Jerry Jeudy, who we already established has been unreliable, to say the least. Marvin Mims is not a finished product at receiver. What little Jordan Humphrey or Brandon Johnson, those aren't alphas. Cortland Sutton is the closest thing the Broncos have to an alpha. In an ideal world, he'd be a number 2. So I am keeping Court and hopefully, making that contract work.
And if you did move on from Sutton, suddenly you're not so quick to just say, we're going to release Tim Patrick. You're going to go, hey, we want to renegotiate things here and maybe keep you around 1 year, prove it, come back, but it's a juicy prove it. But even that would be sketchy, Zach, because we're talking about a veteran receiver missed the last 2 years due to pre-season injuries. So that wouldn't exactly be anything to hang your hat on. A quick shift of gears real quick. Leroy, I want to grab this. We're not always able to grab Leroy's questions, and he had a couple last night that I had earmarked before we ran out of time. I want to grab this for him. Appreciate you always being there on Facebook, Leroy. He says, Football Priest, mile high salute. I was listening to Scott and Nick on Broncos for Breakfast, and both agree at 12 they want Brock Bowers. You want Brock Bowers for the Broncos at 12. Scott, that's your guy. That's your solution? Hold on. I missed this morning's podcast. Oh, we went Brock Bowers. Okay, so mock draft Monday, they ended up taking him. Not necessarily their ideal choice for 12. But either way, who do you want at 12? Who do I want? Let's just say, Zach, it falls in a semi-conventional way based on what we're hearing and whatnot. That would probably mean Daniels is gone. That would mean the top 3 are gone. I'm still I'm hoping that the next best guy is there, Michael Penix. That's what I would want at 12. If he's not there, not enough information has come out since the Wolverines won it all for me to change my current read on JJ McCarthy, and that is he's not a first-round pick. So I'm either trying to trade back or I'm taking an edge rusher right there at 12.
Yeah, we're in lockstep. And, who do I want at 12? I want Drake May at 12. But who do I think would be there at 12? Could be a choice between, like Chad just laid out, Penix or McCarthy or Bo Nix or the best available player, whether it's a corner, edge rusher, lineman, whoever. It would take about, for me, 3 to 4 players that I have pegged as my must-haves to be off the board to go tight end. It's a luxury position. It's not something the Broncos need to prioritize in the first round. Brock Bowers is a great prospect. I have no doubt he'll be a great pro, but there's bigger fish to fry in the Mile High City.
When we look at some of the names, guys like this, like we'll say in the Jeremiah mock, for example, they're already off the board by 12, talking edge rushers like Dallas Turner, mocked at 8, for example, to Atlanta in Jeremiah, his mock version 1.0. Jared Verse going to the Bears at 9. But you're also in position, if the quarterback you want's not there and you're just not in position, you're also there to possibly get an offensive tackle. Like, there are a few options there. Cornerback would be also another priority if you're just not in position to grab a Q. But I would be looking at edge. I mean, this mock has Bo Nix for what it's worth. Bo Nix, Daniel Jeremiah, pick 14, pardon me, going to the Saints. So that's the other one to keep in mind is Bo Nix, Zach, who we also know from a fit perspective, um, arguably number one or number two, just from a fit perspective with Sean Payton, and that can end up being a difference maker too. Like, it wouldn't shock me if the Broncos fall in love with Bo Nix.
Wouldn't shock me either. A lot of people already believe he's a Sean Payton guy. And again, if that's who Sean Payton signs off on and they're all in agreement, I'll be on the Bo Nix bandwagon. But Leroy, if my guy isn't there and my guy realistically, I guess, would be Jaden Daniels, even though he has no chance of being there, I'm of the mind to just trade down, stockpile capital, maybe like we talked about, get a second round pick in return and still get a damn good player in round one.
And this is a good point too that Scott made this morning. He said, I argued that if you think Bo Nix is good enough to go number 14 overall to the Saints, he's not getting past the Broncos at 12. Very, very good insight there. Okay, Zach, back to this conversation. Let me pull this up again. Colby, thank you, bro. So good to see the Triple C. I'd rather pay Kirk Cousins than have Jimmy G.
Oh, yeah.
Hopefully a quarterback falls to us in the draft or we can move up a couple spots. I mean, to me, Zach, again, we're not we're saying miss us on the reclamation projects, but Kirk Cousins is immensely a superior option to Jimmy G. But you got 30 million guaranteed to offer this cat because that's what it would take.
I'm a big Kirk Cousins guy. Of course, he's a better option than Jimmy G. But yeah, you're right. I don't think he would come very cheap, Chad. And the question is as well, and again, I'm a Kirk Cousins guy. Is he going to lead you and win a Super Bowl? Will you win a Super Bowl with Kirk Cousins as your quarterback? And I have my doubts about that, Chad. We probably know the answer to that question. We don't know the answer to that question when it comes to players like Penix or Jaden Daniels or Bo Nix or JJ McCarthy. That's why I want to take a chance on the unknown.
Phil jumping in again to say, okay, there's no quarterback available at 12. Which player do we pick? Arnold, Turner, O'Dunes. On that, Zach, I'm taking the edge. I'm taking Dallas Turner there every time, especially player of his caliber. Like, if you could get him at 12 and because you couldn't get your quarterback, like, it's a gift horse. I'm not looking in the mouth. I'd rather take him if he's there at 12 than even try trading back. Like, this is, again, assuming you can't get the top three. You're not sold on Nix. You're not sold on Penix, etc.
Yeah, I mean, I would rank them in terms of priorities: quarterback, edge rusher, and then corner. So if quarterback's not there, I would definitely go with Dallas Turner as well. Though I'm not going to cry if Arnold is the pick, Chad, because him and PS2 would be a pretty formidable duo for years to come.
Well said. Okay, thank you, Phil. Much love and respect. All right, let me get back to this this topic here. So we've talked about Judy, we've talked about Sutton. What about Justin Simmons? All right, Cortland Sutton's last Pro Bowl came 2019. 2019. Simmons coming off a Pro Bowl and second team All Pro. Surely he could get more. Well, you got to remember too, he's on the wrong side of 30. So here's what Bob says. Despite his Pro Bowl bids, one should not expect multiple high round picks in exchange for Simmons. The Broncos might be able to get, say, a 24 third rounder if, there's a caveat, an acquiring team either wants to extend Simmons or believes he could get a top dollar contract in free agency. More likely, though, Broncos are looking at a 2024 fourth round pick in exchange for Simmons, with the possibility of also a late round pick in 25. Would that be worth dealing away a team captain and perennial Pro Bowl caliber player, albeit, Zach, on the wrong side of 30? What say you?
I'm not as big as a Simmons guy as a lot of people are in Broncos country, but it's the same. I have the same test to all these players in that, do the Broncos have the replacement on the roster? Could they afford trading them away and still go on like normal? And the question to Jerry Jeudy was, yes, they have a player behind him and Marvin Mims. Cortland Sutton was no. And in Simmons' case, I don't think, who do you rely on, Chad, PJ Locke, who's, I guess, an okay number 2, probably better as a number 3. Caden Stearns, who we're both very high on, but he's unreliable considering he's been injury prone. Delarian Turner-Yell looks like a backup for his career to me. So if they had a healthy Stearns who didn't miss the season and he was just itching and raring to go, I would consider parting with Simmons. But I do think in this case, Denver would be better with him on the roster than without him on the roster.
I agree. And keep in mind too, PJ Locke, a free agent himself. Now he's not going to command top dollar, but you know, you're going to have to put out some money to get him back if you want. And it's no sure thing. You know, there other teams might have been very intrigued by what he put on tape this year. I mean, his game did have some warts, but they were of the young player learning to be a starter ilk, not necessarily huge shortcomings to his game. Okay, last one here in the article from Bob, Garett Bolles. This is a name to really keep an eye on too, because contract year, way on the wrong side of 30. Here's what Bob writes. He's entering the final year of his contract. He'll be 32 years old and is considered a good but not elite offensive tackle. On the other hand, it's not unusual for offensive tackles, especially nowadays, to deliver quality play into their mid-30s. That might be enough for the Broncos to get a 24th third-round pick in return for Bolles. If the acquiring team wants to extend Bolles, the Broncos perhaps would be in line, Zach, to get more. To me, if you could get a third-round pick for Bolles, I'm not sure. Again, I guess also factoring in his salary this year and factoring in that his age, even that being perhaps the guy that could get you the most today, although it's arguable, I'm still not sure that's worth losing a set and forget left tackle. Again, might not be elite, but you nowadays, the last 4 years of his career, he's proven at least that he's trustworthy and reliable at left tackle.
And does he pass or fail my test? Do the Broncos have his ready-made replacement on the squad? And they don't. I mean, maybe Alex Palczewski?
By the way, it's Palczewski.
Okay.
Palczewski.
So maybe if he develops, he could eventually become a starter. But what are you going to do? Re-sign Cameron Fleming and have him start at left tackle? That would be a disaster. Garett, never been the biggest Garett Bolles guy, but he wasn't bad. He was pretty good in 2023. He graded out, according to Pro Football Focus, I think top 15 or top 10 in most metrics. So I would consider it heavily for a second-round pick, only because the Broncos don't pick there. But for a third, you would have to be banking on drafting his replacement immediately, and that replacement being as good or better than Bolles. It's tough.
Okay, for craps and giggles, since you just brought it up, I'm going to check and see where he finished grade-wise with PFF. Okay, hold on, stand by. He finished 19th. He had a good season, though. I mean, he finished with a grade of 7, a cumulative grade that factors in pass and run of 75.9. This was a season that had quite a few really good left tackle individual performances. So Garett Bolles finished this past season graded as the 19th best left tackle, or I should say 19th best tackle in the NFL. His shining grade, though, Zach, comes as a pass blocker. You would think it's the other way around, but according to Pro Football Focus, he got, let's call it a B+ grade compared to, say, a C+ as a run blocker.
It's important. Again, Garett Bolles is never going to be Walter Jones on the left side, but the most important thing is whoever's quarterbacking the Broncos in 24 is to keep that quarterback upright and let him progress in the pocket and not get happy feet or see ghosts, not be Jamarcus Russell or David Card right away. And if Garett Bolles can help in that goal, I'm more than willing to keep him on board at his current salary, Chad.
I want to grab this from James on Facebook. Appreciate you being with us. Guys, we're, by the way, approaching the 45-minute mark. Any burning topics, questions, get it in the chat ASAP, because we'll probably be winding it down here pretty soon. Appreciate you guys. James on Facebook, is Bo Nix ready to start this season? Or you keep Russ one more year to get him ready for the following year? Denver Broncos for life, MHH. Appreciate the question. I'm not sure yet. That's my answer. And I don't mean to stroke you and string you along, but I'm not confident in the answer. He probably would need a little bit of time, but again, my opinion is you draft a first-round quarterback, Part of the reason you're drafting that first round quarterback is because you believe he's good enough. He's far enough along we'll call it the road of development where you can plausibly expect to play him early, because that's how you develop a first round quarterback nowadays. It's not like it used to be back in the 80s and 90s. And this was a trapping, by the way, that the Broncos fell into a little bit with Paxton Lynch in particular, and Gary Kubiak and John Elway not quite seeing eye to eye there. But you got to play him. You got to get him in as soon as possible. I'm not convinced yet. And by the way, the whole Russ thing, Scott puts it, he puts it best right here on Russ. The money thing doesn't work for Russ. If you commit to Russ for one more year, again, this is based on that 5-year $250 million extension Zach he got in August of 22. You're basically committing to Russ. If you commit to him one more year, it's not just for one more year. You're committing to him for 3 years. So the whole reason that the Broncos are strongly considering cutting bait with Russ right now is so they can get out from under his contract instead of that being in 3 years, in 2 years. So the pain lasts 2 years instead of 3. I think, Zach, where they kind of get into a little bit of a logical fallacy here is, even if you say we want to get out from under that in 2 years, not 3, cool. But he's not bad enough to say, okay, he's just not bad enough to make that logic, to justify that logic, in my opinion. Could he improve? Absolutely. There's plenty of warts. We've talked a lot about it from last year with Peyton, but I still think there was enough there you could build on. Like, I do not understand the apocalyptic take or stance the Broncos seem to have on the Russ contract right now relative to how he played in 2023.
Well, you're right. There's two schools of thought when it comes to developing a young or rookie quarterback. Either throw him into the fire, a la CJ Stroud, and hope for the best, or have him sit for a year, half a season, whatever, a la Jordan Love, a la Patrick Mahomes, and then go from there. And I think in this case with Bo Nix, he's not exactly day one ready. You're banking on the ceiling, not necessarily the floor. So I would see a Alex Smith Mahomes situation happen where Jarrett Stidham would play Alex Smith, start the season, let Nix develop on the bench, and when they deem him ready, then Nix will come in and hopefully take over for the long term. That's how I see that going.
Okay, one last topic, Zach, I wanted to get your thoughts on. I forgot to talk about this last night. By the way, Ronk, you the man, love you, big dog. Is the idea of Pete Carmichael, who was Sean Payton's longtime lieutenant, offensive linchpin coach, offensive coordinator with the Saints. They're cutting him loose. I have a really good source close to the Raiders, actually, with Antonio Pierce, or a guy that knows some things. It was like, hey, you're going to consider Carmichael? Nah, he's going to Denver. He's going to end up in Denver. The belief is that he lands in Denver. Do you expect the Broncos to make a place for him, Zach?
I mean, probably. I said welcome to the Broncos the moment he was let go by New Orleans. I said that in jest, but also with how much Sean Payton loves former coaches and assistants and players, he's big on familiarity. So if Carmichael doesn't get another spot elsewhere, which he could, I can see him joining the staff. But you already have Joe Lombardi, who's Sean Payton's confidant, right-hand man. How many cooks in the kitchen do you need before it becomes a Nathaniel Hackett coaches coaching the coaches situation, Chad?
Yeah, I mean, I could see it shaking out, and I expect it to shake out something like this. You did hire Joe Lombardi. The offense, clearly, I mean, the derisive way Sean Payton talked about the overall offense at the podium 2 weeks ago at his end of season presser, clearly dissatisfied. Like, there's enough there of all the coaches, even though this is his baby, right? The offense is Sean Payton's baby. It wouldn't shock me in the least if they decided, oh, Pete's available, goodbye, Joe Lombardi. But what I expect more to happen is, okay, Joe, you're our run game coordinator. Pete, you're our pass game coordinator, which is something that Kyle Shanahan has made a thing, specifically in the NFL. Grover and other teams too, but like McVay and the Rams. Grover, thank you for the 11th hour super chat, my friend. We're about to wind down. Helps us end on a high note. He says, if we draft a quarterback, I want them to be our next Elway, a long-term stud. I don't think that caliber of quarterback is in this class, let alone at 12. Do we go edge? Yeah, if you're not convinced a franchise quarterback is within your reach in this draft or just not in this draft class, to me, the next priority is edge or trade back. Or edge, your right guy's not there, so offensive tackle, then trade back. But what's your answer, Zach?
Well, number one, when it comes to Carmichael, Chad, I mean, you touched on something I've seen a lot on social media. Maybe make him a run game coordinator, pass game coordinator. My answer to that is if you have to have so many different coordinators, what are you paying Sean Million $18 million a year for? He's supposed to be the guy. He's supposed to be the offensive innovator. So I would prefer not to hire Carmichael, but that's obviously a question to go. In terms of where the Broncos go at 12, I'm steadfast on this. If you don't go quarterback, you have to take your next best available player at a position of need. And I think edge is the second most needed position behind quarterback. So I agree, Grover. If that guy's there, whoever that guy may be, I'm good going edge at 12.
This is, thank you, Mr. Producer. Jordan Love kind of cuts against my argument that first rounders got to play. It's weird, but guys like him and Aaron Rodgers are the exceptions that prove the rule when it comes to first round quarterbacks that go on to have success in the league. You could argue Patrick Mahomes as well. He didn't have to sit 3 years, but he did sit basically his whole first year, right? For Alex Smith, come in. I think his first career start was against the Broncos in the season finale that year. Paxton Lynch versus Patrick Mahomes. But to me, Jordan Love, the answer here is pretty obvious. He's having success not just because he's good. It's more attributable not to his 3 years on the bench, Zach, learning, as it were, but because of his talent and the fact that he's getting really good coaching.
Well, I mean, I only brought up Jordan Love because, again, teams go one of two ways with young quarterbacks. There's cases where sitting a quarterback for a year doesn't work out. There's cases where it does work out, and cases where playing someone right away doesn't work out and does work out as well. So it's if you have the right guy, and I think I agree with Scott here, if you have the guy and he has everything you need, it doesn't really matter what you do with him. It's just getting the right guy. That's the toughest part.
Fun conversation, and we appreciate each and every one of you for being here with us for it. We got a couple messages, though, and then we're going to dip out.
Another tremendous installment of the Mile High Huddle podcast. If you're not doing so, please follow us on Twitter at the MHH Pod. You can follow the main account on Twitter at Mile High Huddle, Chad at Chad and Jensen, myself at Kelberman NFL, and Scott, our producer, at Scout Kennedy. If you guys want some merch like we're rocking each and every podcast, check out mhhmerch.com and get you some. If you haven't, drop us a like at facebook.com/Mile High Huddle Pod. You can also find us on Instagram at mile_high_huddle. And if you haven't done so on Apple Podcasts, make sure you're leaving your football priest a 5-star review for a chance to win some of that merch each and every single month. But if anything, y'all, please subscribe, like, and share this video and every video you see on the MHH channel. It really helps us grow and reach more Broncos fans just like you, baby.
A special shout out and a mile high salute to our great super chat superstars and supporters tonight, helping us keep the lights on. The Duchess, Michaela Parker, Zeus McPeak, Grover. We got the Ronk. We got Phil McLaughlin. We got Colby. We got Doug and Tyler. Much love and respect. Really appreciate you guys. Seriously, thank you very much. We're off tomorrow. We're off Wednesday, but Zach and I back in the saddle Thursday night. And maybe by then we'll have something to sink our teeth into relative to the Russell Wilson situation.
Regardless, can't wait to speak to y'all then. Have a great start to your week. Take care. And as always, go Broncos.